Hello and a warm welcome back to the Pitch Side podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast and all the content on the channel. Of course, follow us on social media. I'm at Side PSP on Twitter, Pitch Side Pod on Instagram, and of course, listen on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform. Welcome to episode 160 and join us for always more. So, 3 weeks are left until the kickoff of the Euros, of course, in the 11th of June, and that means a lot of things. It means, obviously, that the end of the season is pretty near, and, of course, that the squads for the national teams participating in the Euros are starting to get out, and, of course, that's another subject on its own we're going to be talking about on the magazine episode next Saturday, hopefully the last one of the normal season, since it is the Champions League final preview on Friday, obviously. So we have to do a squad-related magazine episode on Saturday before the start of the proper podcast Euro, which is going to be 1 week afterwards. But the of course, squads are starting to go out, as I mentioned, and of course, some of the biggest teams in Europe announced their squad. France announced their squad, of course. Germany, England, Spain, Italy, Portugal, of course, some favorites of the Euros. Belgium as well. They announced their 26-man squad, of course. Exceptionally making this 26-man for this tournament in particular, and obviously one of the biggest surprises of that is the return of Karim Benzema to the French squad after 5 years or more of not featured in the squad, since the famous allegations for him about some sex tapes related to his fellow national teammate Matteo Valbuena. I mean, he was not proven guilty, but obviously this casted a big shadow over his reputation, over his national team future. Obviously, Noël Le Graët, the president of the French Federation, was adamant that Benzema wasn't going to be returning to the team. It went even as far as at the time, I think, the president of the government at France, also denied him and said that there's no place for someone like that on the national team. But, life turns around and life goes around, and what goes around comes around. Karim Benzema is back after 6 years to the national team. Obviously, I mean, it was a more of a sporting deserved return rather than a reputation, because the guy, forced himself, I would say, into the national team squad. I don't think that France have a potent striker in Olivier Giroud. Obviously, the whole history between Benzema and Giroud, the comparison, to the Ferrari sports car and all of that, and the whole sort of debate and debacle about them too. And of course, his accusation of the national team of France by being racist, by calling Giroud and not him. I've calling up Giroud and not him. And obviously, it's a big backstory for Karim Benzema's exit or exile from the national team. Clearly, this is not a bury of the hatchet between him and Didier Deschamps. It's just the fact that, the public opinion in France started really pressuring, I would say, Didier Deschamps to make this decision after a couple of years since Cristiano Ronaldo left, where Karim Benzema was pretty much the man at Real Madrid. He's the one lifting them in the last couple of seasons. He lifted them towards La Liga title last season. He pretty much helped them be in the semi-final of the Champions League this season. His goals in the group stages against the likes of Mönchengladbach and Inter Milan. He's the guy that really, really stood out in Real Madrid for the last couple of years or so. And despite his age, despite the problems that his age presents, he still acts like someone who's probably in his mid-20s. He could still give a couple of good years for Real Madrid, so why not give a couple of good years for France as well at 33 years of age? And his tally of goals for France is pretty weak, considering the fact that he played 81 games, he scored only 27, and that is, of course, unbelievably low. Obviously, the fact that you didn't play 6 years for the national team and you don't be featured in 6 years for the national team is pretty much a sort of a good excuse why you only score 27 goals. Obviously, Karim Benzema back in the day, or when he first started to play with the national team, he played probably at the worst generation of the French national team, a generation that just got out of the World Cup in the first round in 2010, the whole debacle about that sort of team. Then you have the exit from 2014 in the round of quarterfinal, pretty much, or round of 16. Before that, an exit from the round of 16 in the Euros, or the quarterfinal of the Euros in 2012. Then, of course, after that, the team that reached the final, which Benzema wasn't part of because of the scandal. So Benzema sort of played in the worst transitional period, or maybe the longest transitional period for a national team generation in Europe. Absolutely, those 5 years between 2012 and 2015 were pretty dark for French national team. The last squad that Karim Benzema was in is pretty weird. I mean, Bakary Sagna was part of it. Those guys, Clichy, part of it. I mean, Raphael Varane was still, starting to feel his way into the national team. Antoine Griezmann, of course. Then you have Moussa Sissoko being a starter. Where is he in this squad that is going to the 2020 Euros? I mean, the squad right now is different. The French squad is bloated with talent, absolutely. You look around, of course. The squad itself has so many surprises, really. Aside from the fact that Benzema is returning, there is, of course, the omission of Eduardo Camavinga, someone like him, the omission of Dayton Upamecano, the omission of Lacazette, the omission of Theo Hernandez, all of those guys not even making it into the squad as well. But obviously you have to ask yourself, despite the return of Karim Benzema, you have to ask yourself, is it going to be any good? Is the return of Benzema going to add to France rather than detract from it? Obviously, he's in the squad, so he's going to be the number one striker. I don't think that there's any too much doubt about it. I don't think that Didier Deschamps would bring someone like him with his performances the last couple of seasons and make him sit on the bench for someone like Giroud, who been sitting on the bench for the last couple of years and hasn't been scoring that much. I mean, he's considered a World Cup winner, but he didn't even take any shot on target during the whole tournament in 2018. So you're guaranteed, I think, efficiency in Karim Benzema, and obviously that creates another sort of problem of how you build the team around him. Who are you going to be playing around him exactly? Are you going to be playing Griezmann, Mbappe, as like proper wingers when he's striking Griezmann as someone who's playing underneath him? Or they play Mbappe and Koeman and Coman and someone else as wingers? It's different. I mean, it's really, really different for how you ask about it. Obviously, again, it's a big surprise. It's a big announcement. It's a big point, I think, in Benzema's career to return to the national team at this age and at this stage of his career. Well deserved, I would say, again on sporting merit. I mean, but definitely the whole scandal with Mathieu Valbuena hurt his reputation too much, to the point where it's going to be hard for him maybe to get into the national team and get with teammates that some of them are still there from that time. Paul Pogba, I think, is still there. Griezmann is still there. Hugo Lloris obviously is still there. So it's not going to be quite a dead horse yet. But clearly some of the French players, we saw Mbappe expressing that on Twitter, on Instagram, social media, expressing his love for Benzema, his anticipation and ambition to link up with him, and rightfully so. I mean, someone like him is going to add a lot to someone like Kylian Mbappe with the experience that he has, and it's going to be a great learning curve, I think, for someone like Kylian Mbappe. Despite all of he achieved at his age, he just still to make some kinks in his game that he's still to fix. And obviously, I don't think there's anyone better than Benzema to learn from in terms of the footballing style. Again, we're not going to be talking about the proper squads now. We're going to leave that to another episode, and obviously I will have a lot to talk about when it comes to the French episode and the omission of the players that I mentioned, but we'll leave that to another time. Speaking of France and speaking of Frenchmen, we're talking about another Frenchman, but not Benzema. We're talking about Zineddine Zidane future, and amongst the major rumours, talking about him leaving Real Madrid. I mean, he denied those rumours, but I think it's pretty clear that he's not going to be staying a lot at Real Madrid, particularly if they don't win La Liga. He might want to choose somewhere else, and obviously the choices, I think, are pretty much limited when it comes to Zineddine Zidane in particular. There's only either Juventus or going to the French national team, which is going to be probably the big position for him somewhere down the line. But at the moment, it's pretty undisputed where he's going to go. The suggestions are that he might want to go to Juventus. I mean, the links have been there. He's been quite teasing of a move there in some of his statements, saying that it's a good move for him, and maybe in the future, who knows, who would it be? I mean, at the time, it sounded like it's a call to Juventus to come and get him, pretty much, and try to persuade the guy to come to them. I don't think it will need much persuasion, really, because Juventus are a big part of Zidane's career. Yes, he didn't play for there for a lot, but definitely he's a player that deserved a job like that at Juventus, and he's a proven manager. I mean, no disrespect to Pirlo, he's a great legend as a player and all of that, but he's in uncharted waters as far as managing is concerned, and starting with a move like Juve, and he just won the Coppa Italia, we can understand this, but as far as the whole experience or the whole season, it's pretty much a big disappointment. I mean, if they make it to the Champions League, it will be fine, I guess, but definitely overall it's a big disappointment for someone like Pirlo. I mean, although his inexperience could be a good excuse for him. Unlike Zidane, who will come in with a vast majority of experience, obviously will come in with a vast trophy behind him as well, with Real Madrid winning about 11 titles with the club, and you add to them now La Liga and the Super League, not the Super League, a Super Cup in the last couple of years that he had with Real Madrid in his second stint. I mean, the guy is a serial successful winner. He's someone who loves trophies. He might not be the best tactician in the world, Zineddine Zidane, but he obviously is one of the, he can be one of the greatest minds in football, and also, again, he's one of the most successful managers at the moment, and his trophy cabinet, I think, as a manager, speaks for itself. The guy won 3 Champions Leagues in a row in his first stint with Real Madrid, and it's absolutely, I think, perfect timing if he goes to Juventus now. Is he going to be the saviour, though? It's not known, really. It's not sure, but definitely he will add some more experience than whatever Pirlo is going to be adding. Again, he might not be the best tactician, but he would add a lot of experience, he would add a lot of charisma, I would say, to that position, and obviously he's someone who likes to work calmly, and I don't think that Andrea Agnelli is going to refuse someone like him coming to the club, even if he wants to impose his will and impose his vision on the players that he wants to buy, which is something that Zidane clearly would want to. The other options, though, or the other option, as in, the one option that is left, is the national team in France. And at the moment, despite the I would say the strength of France, that position, might not be available at the moment. Didier Deschamps, he's doing good. He's really doing good. World Cup winner, favourites to win the Euros. I think super favourites with the squad that they have at the moment, and it's going to be a pretty big disappointment if they don't. But I think that job is still too early, I think, for Zineddine Zidane's managerial career, despite his achievements in the short amount of time he took Real Madrid as a proper first manager. I don't think it's time yet for him to take the national team job. If he takes it now, it's going to be too harsh. Really, he's going to have to make a pretty big amount of choices for the French national team, unlike he does for Real Madrid, where he basically picks up from a 25 man squad at the very best. When he's going to France, he's going to have to pick from, I don't know, how many hundreds of players that's going to be out there in the talent pool, and he would be having to pick a squad. Obviously, there will be constants. You expect someone like Mbappe to be called every time to the national French squad. You expect someone like Griezmann to be called up until he retires. You expect someone like Pogba to be called up upon until he retires. Conte as well. You expect those kind of players. But definitely for Zineddine Zidane, his tendency to, ignore some players on purpose, I would say, might be hurting him in the French national team job. But obviously, as a quality of a coach, he would be a great coach for the national team of France, and obviously he might even be able to replicate the success he had with the French national team as a player in winning the World Cup and winning the Euros, which is going to be quite the feat if he does achieve that. If Didier Deschamps achieves that will discredit him if he makes that achievement once again. But obviously, it will be no small feat if he takes the French national team as a coach one day to another World Cup or another European tournament. So at the moment, the future is ambiguous. Zineddine Zidane is not officially leaving Real Madrid yet, but it looks for all intents and purposes that the Valladolid game or the Villarreal game on Sunday will be his last. So we'll wait and see again how things are going to be running out for him in the near future. We're still talking about the leaving players and coaches and all of that, and the transfer window and the transfer mill is going to go around in the summer. But obviously one of his biggest movers, I would say, would probably be Harry Kane, who's been adamant about leaving Tottenham Hotspur, and he's reiterated his desire to leave the club, multiple times. That is going to affect, obviously, is going to have effect on any game Tottenham's going to have in at the moment. And obviously, they have a proper game against Leicester City in the Premier League. But obviously, the questions are: one, where Harry Kane should go next, and two, which is probably more important at the moment, is Tottenham going to let him leave? Are Tottenham going to let him go? Obviously, he's 27. He still have 3 years on his contract with Tottenham Hotspur. He's scored over 165 goals for them. He gave them a lot of time. He was pretty loyal, I would say, for them since joining in 2012. And he's definitely someone who helped that club reach the level that he's reaching at the moment. He was an important part of them being in the Champions League final, an important part of them competing for the league title at a certain point in a couple of seasons over the last decade or so. He's been an important piece of the puzzle, and he's been an important part of the sort of the international expansion that Tottenham had in the last couple of years, with more people coming to really be interested in Tottenham, I would say, and more people becoming supporters of Tottenham and growing the fan base of that club around the world, even with Harry Kane being a big part of that. So definitely the first question is where Harry Kane should go, or where Harry Kane could potentially end up. The options are definitely Man United, Man City, Chelsea in the Premier League. I don't think there's any club outside the Premier League maybe who wants him at the moment because his fee is going to be big. You look at the Spanish clubs. Obviously, the two biggest Spanish clubs are, buried in debt, and they will not be able to do that because his value, I think, is around 100 million euros, maybe at the most. At the utmost, is going to be 100 million euros. So probably it will be unaffordable for the biggest teams in Spain, and Real Madrid and Barcelona. So you're only left with three big contenders in the Premier League. You're left with Man City, who might again bring him as a backup for Haaland if the plan Haaland goes to the water. Also, they could bring Man United, who have a striker at the moment in Cavani, but maybe would look up for someone who could lead them for the next couple of years, because Cavani's 34, he's not that young. He might be a good utility player. He's a great utility player, by the way, Cavani, but definitely could not be their first striker for years to come. Harry Kane could do that job and could give them even that extra level that is needed to win the title, to compete for the trophy in the Premier League alongside the likes of City and a properly fit and a fully fit Liverpool. And then you're left with Chelsea. Obviously, Chelsea were were probably the biggest spenders of the last couple of years. Regardless of Man City, Chelsea were one of the biggest spenders in the English football. They spent like £200 million last season over the bunch of players that they have, the likes of Chilwell and Werner and Havertz, Thiago Silva, all of that, and Ziyech, and they spend a lot. The investment didn't necessarily return with all of the goods, although they could still win the Champions League with those players, and that is going to be quite the achievement. But obviously, it could be a good landing spot for Kane. Timo Werner is not exactly having the best season of his life. He barely scored 10 goals in all competitions, and that is not a good number for someone you bring in with 50 million euros and plus. So it might be a great replacement for him. And definitely, he could be also the extra level that Chelsea need to compete for the title. Because definitely Spurs are going to need a whole rebuild after him, because he's been a part of that club for 8-9 years now. He's been a part of that club fabric for almost a decade. There's going to be a big overhaul needed in that club when he leaves. Some players could be leaving with him, the likes of Son. Gareth Bale is returning to Real Madrid. He's not going to be staying permanently or renewing the loan deal or anything like that. And obviously he's put on sold, by the way, from the Real Madrid board, so you don't know if he's going to be staying at Tottenham or leaving to another club. So for Kane, the options are limited, and necessarily into the Premier League And again, with his statements, the general vibe around him at the club looks at the moment that he is indeed going to be leaving at the end of the season. Tottenham, as much as they would want to hold to him and keep him until the end of his contract, they know that his frustration could be really, really big if he doesn't leave this season. Also depends on the next coach, maybe. Nuno Espirito Santo, question mark, is going to be maybe the next coach for Tottenham after he confirmed that he's going to be exiting Wolverhampton after the game against Manchester United. So clearly there's going to be maybe a whole host of links. Is he going to be the good coach enough to convince Harry Kane to stay at Tottenham? It's going to be a big meal after the Euros if Harry Kane is leaving. Maybe even before the Euros we will know where Harry Kane is going. We will know where he's going to be next, his next destination. But as I mentioned, there's limited options for him, mostly in the Premier League and mostly, of course, the two Manchester clubs and Chelsea, because they're the only ones who have enough money, I think, to persuade him and to have him on a big wage like they have their own players at the moment. But again, as usual, we'll always wait and see what's going to be happening. Still continuing in the theme of players leaving their clubs, and obviously we all know that Sergio Aguero is leaving Man City at the end of the season, and we talked about that in previous episodes, and we said that he's a great player, he's a Premier League legend, a bona fide superstar. We always were asking about the destinations we're going to end up, and one of them obviously was Barcelona, with the links up with Lionel Messi and all of that, and the Argentine connection there, and it looks like it's going to be that way. Apparently it's not confirmed yet. It's not in the realm of officiality, but clearly the rumours are strong, suggesting that Sergio Aguero will be moving to Barcelona. And straight off the bat, I'm really against this. Because, listen, Luis Suarez was booted out of the club last season because he's old, right? He was booted out of the club because he's 34 and he cannot give the club any more. Like, that's what Koeman said. The guy was old enough, he cannot give Barcelona any more effort, any more time. That's what he said. And they booted Luis Suarez out of the club in arguably the worst way possible, in order to bring in young and exciting players, and started working with the young players and all of that. But where are the young players? That is one. Two, you booted Luis Suarez and he scored 17 goals for Atletico Madrid and he's helping them to win the trophy. And despite the fact that Messi scored 30 on your side, you cannot really say that it held Barcelona anywhere near winning the title this season. In fact, it feels like the 30 goals that Messi scored were useless. So you boot Luis Suarez because he's old, because he's 34, and then you bring in Aguero, who's going to be 33 in the summer. He's going to be 33. And yet, listen, Barcelona at the moment are only able to buy 3 players. That is it. Like, they only can buy three players. Like, the people who thinking or fantasizing, I would say, about buying the likes of Erling Haaland, about buying I don't know who other players are going to be bought. Haaland is probably the biggest player linked with Barcelona at the moment, but I don't know where else. Memphis Depay contract runs over, so that's why he's close there on a free. Even Wijnaldum, who is linked at a certain point with Barcelona, is going to be probably moving to Bayern Munich at the moment, as it looks, as part of a negotiation deal involving Thiago Alcantara since last season. So clearly, Barcelona probably, in my opinion, Barcelona are making a bad business move. They're going to go for Aguero. Yes, he's free, but so is a lot of other players you could find across. If you stay playing with this squad, better than you add Aguero at 33. And I know Aguero at 33 is still a good player. He's still a great player. Still score goals. He's still going to give you some goals. But he's not going to be as effective as you want him to be. He's not going to be as effective as, per se, 5 or 6 years ago when he was at his absolute prime. If he's going to be winning Man City the Champions League, obviously he's going to be a fringe player in that final, I would say. He may be a sub in that final. I don't think he will start. Clearly, it's not a good business move, but definitely I could be proven wrong. I could be proven wrong with that. But Barcelona's track record, as far as strikers is concerned, as of late, is not exactly good. Doesn't exactly help you read well into the situation. You look at the players that they brought as of late. You remember. I mean, they brought in the likes of Kevin Prince Boateng, for God's sake. I mean, for huge wages, not exactly a fee, but huge wages. And that didn't go down really well. You remember the couple of players they bought as of late is not exactly great. They burned out a lot of players, and Aguero might be the latest addition for those. So as far as a business move is concerned, yes, it's good. Purely financially, it's good. You bring in the player on a free. You're going to get a loan to pay the wages for the moment to settle the bill. Obviously, Laporta's going to be selling a couple of players as well, putting them on the market. So that is gonna make ends meet of sorts. But definitely, as far as footballing move and the argumentation or the process behind this move is really weird, because you boot in Luis Suarez, someone who scored a lot of goals for you and probably would still score a couple for you if you kept him around. I mean, how many games Barcelona missed because they didn't have a potent striker who puts the ball into the net? Forget about Messi scoring 30 goals. How many chances Barcelona missed this season in a lot of games, in El Clasico, in the games against Atletico Madrid, in the games against Athletic Bilbao, in the games that Barcelona lost and Barcelona drew this season? How dearly they missed someone who could put the ball in the net. And yes, Aguero could do that, but again, the process and the argumentation behind the deal is really weird. I don't understand it, and I don't see any kind of logic behind it, unfortunately. That's it for me for this episode. For the magazine episode, I was with the HOD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast and all the content on the channel. And until tomorrow, I will be seeing you soon. Goodbye.